Okay. Well, today is Wednesday, the 22nd. And this place is pretty much a disaster because I've been totally focused on getting some paint on this stuff. To the point where I haven't cleaned anything. I mean, I'm just doing what I need to do and going on to the next step. Nothing in between. But just finished putting some paint on this. And what I'm using two different products here, just for anybody's information. I'm using these two products, the Eastwood Extreme Chassis Black and this SEM Trim Black, which is kind of a General Motors, under hood, inner fender, all that kind of stuff, trim paint. The chassis black, obviously, you buy online from Eastwood. The other stuff, the paint distributors that distribute to the body shops, you can buy that locally. And the SEM product I can buy probably 30% cheaper than the Eastwood product. And this is the first time I'm using either one. The Eastwood product I just used on the axle, on the rear end here, and it really works nice. I like the pattern better. It's got a nice fine pattern. You point it at something and it covers it all. You don't have a hard time getting it into nooks and crannies. It just goes right there. The paint is really nicely atomized and the pattern is fine. Looks like it's pretty easy to do it too. I put a fairly wet coat on this in there. It doesn't look to be like any sags or runs anywhere. So this stuff works pretty nice. It covers easy and, quickly. You can put a nice wet coat on. So I'm really happy with it. I like it. The only problem with it is, obviously, I'm on the West Coast. Eastwood's on the East Coast. So unless you buy a case of it so you don't run out, I don't know how much light you're seeing here because from the screen it don't look like there's very much. I'm on the West Coast and it's on the supplier is on the East Coast. The vendor, Eastwood's on the East Coast. So you have to order this stuff a week in advance of when you need it and make sure you order enough. The other stuff I can get locally, so I can go, 15 minutes and have more. That's the other stuff. That's the SEM product. And it works nice, but it takes, that's your typical type of paint where you put a fog coat and then a little wetter coat, and then you follow a third with a nice wet coat. And it looks like it works well too, but I think it probably uses more material. The atomization isn't quite as fine, so the other one, the Eastwood, is a little easier to use. I think you get better coverage quicker. But this looks like it works pretty nice, I have to say. I put a little patch on these X's up here that are underneath the gas tank, above the gas tank. I tried a little bit of each, and this one looks like it dries a little duller, flatter than the Eastwood. The Eastwood chassis black is called satin too, but it's a little shinier than this stuff. So like I say, since I'm going to need more of this, I got a bigger area to cover. I'm using the SEM on the frame and the underfloor, and the Eastwood I'm using on the differential and the springs and accessory stuff that bolt on. I think there's only one other problem with the Eastwood. While the Eastwood works nice, I used their primer, their self-etching primer, on that area I was just showing you under the trunk, and only to find out when I picked up the can of the chassis black, it says not to be used over self-etching primer, even their self-etching primer. And their website doesn't give you any in-between materials to use either. So that's kind of a bummer. You use their self-etching primer and then you can't use their chassis material over the top of it. What I found through the online, obviously, is if you go with a urethane, like a primer surfacer in between, you can do that. The concern with the compatibility of the two products, the top coat and the self-etch primer, is of adhesion. The self-etch primer is an acid base, they say, and any top coat doesn't want to stick over that too well. So what they tell you to do is use a urethane primer sealer. So that's what I've done here on the axle. I used the self-etching primer first because the axle was bare. And then I followed that up with a primer surfacer. That's a urethane base, an acrylic. And then the chassis black over the top. And like I said, I think it's going to work out well. It sure acted like it was compatible. I don't know if you can tell that way or not, but that's my impression. And I like the way it looks so far. And it's kind of shiny right now because it's wet. But see if I can get you away from the light. The camera's focusing, I think, because the door's open, focusing on the light. Hope you can see that pretty well. Anyway, that's where we're at here today. Happy I'm finally getting some color on this thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Bye. Hello there. Well, it's Friday, August 24th. We've painted the last few pieces on our current mini project. What do you want? A current step, and that's the rear end. Getting everything ready to reinstall the rear end. The last few pieces happen to be these 4 U-bolts. The bottom plates I painted yesterday. They didn't dry. Late yesterday, and they weren't dry. So I hung them out here, put a little tiny bit of heat on them with the heat gun, just warmed them, and hung them out here, and they're nice and dry now. The U-bolts, I used some. I was going to try and make them silver color, so they look like they were cadmium plated or whatever, and that didn't work. So I took that paint off this morning and did them with the same paint I'm using on the chassis, that trim paint, primer and a trim paint. So they're dry now, and I'm leaving them out here to get them nice and dry, nice and cured. And today is cleaning day, long overdue cleaning day. You can see, looks much more tidy in here. I'm about maybe almost halfway, probably halfway through. This side is pretty well cleaned up, which I think is the hard side because of all the stuff that has to get moved in order to clean. That dust is like, I don't know, what's like taping dust, it gets everywhere. And I mean everywhere. So this side, the back section here, where you see the hoses laying, up to the cabinet. I haven't cleaned the cabinet, all of that, because you can see it's all covered in that brown dust from the cleaning and probably now from some overspray too. You see the floor? That black on the floor is mostly overspray from painting all these black parts here. So I'm vacuuming that up. You see the difference here. Even the garage door, can you tell? I don't know if there's enough light here to tell. I've done this half with the vacuum, and you can see the color there if it focuses. There it is. You can see a foot on the other side of the center hinges. It's kind of that brownish, that's that dust. So I still have a ways to go, but this is kind of the easier side. I don't have to move everything. I'm not planning on moving everything anyway. The back counter, I'm going to do a little more thorough, remove that cover and vacuum around the sheet metal brake, try and get something under the cabinet, go around all of this stuff. The air compressor, I'll hit that with the brush. It's all dusty on the top too. Maybe do the top of the welder and that clock thing over the engine stand there. So we're catching up on it. I'm going to try and put that back on here probably tomorrow. I have an idea. You notice I protected these. What I'm going to try and do is put those spring plates on there
set the springs on the plates and set the rear end down on top of the springs, if it will cooperate. That should be the dimension I need between the two springs for them to line up with the spring perches are really close. I ended up having to shrink these. Can you see those? No. The bolt heads were bigger than the hole in the bottom of the perch by 25 to 30 thousandths, big enough that they weren't going to go in there. And I was going to drill the holes out, but there's no room behind there for a bit to go through. Maybe if I had a mill the right size or something and was able to hold it. But so I did the other approach. I took the bolts out. You can see them here on the spring. I took the bolts out one at a time. And I don't have a lathe, so what I did is I carefully used the belt sander. And, you know, just reduced them a little at a time, had the calipers over there, and I reduced them a little at a time. And it takes a fair amount to do it that way. I mean, it doesn't go fast, so you don't, if you're careful, you're not going to go over. But anyway, it seems to work. That's what the little tags are in there, because they're custom fitted. The passenger side seemed like was a little looser, the hole, and maybe the bolt head was a little smaller. I don't know. No, that one was actually bigger. But anyway, they're custom fitted, so I'm putting the springs on. I got tags so that I know which side they fit. So hopefully tomorrow I might be able to do that. I'm going to try. Everything's nice and dry here already. But anyway, and I'm really happy with the way the paint stuff all worked out. The only mistake I made was I didn't cover this when I painted this, and then the next day I got the springs ready and painted the springs. Well, it's not as smooth as it was, because evidently a little overspray landed on it. The backside, where there's no overspray, the bottom here, you know what I mean, is nice and smooth. You might say the top and the sides facing the spring are not as smooth. They're okay for what it is. They're okay, but that's the only negative, the only disappointment, I guess. The paint worked nice, I have to say, and that's that Eastwood stuff. Although I did have one problem, and I contacted them. Let's see how they respond. You see this can here? Does that look normal to you? I put the nozzle in and put that little trigger thing on top and started painting, and first few squirts was okay. And afterward it started sounding funny, and I noticed it dripping all over the floor because it started doing this. It was flooding the top of the can with paint. So I tried another nozzle and it did exactly the same thing. So I sent a message to Eastwood. Let's see if they will make this good. I mean, at like $20 a can. You know, it's not something I want to just throw away and say, oh, well. But I haven't heard back from them. I sent them a message yesterday, and I sent them a picture because they responded with we got your message. If you want to add anything, here's an email. So I sent them some pictures of this. And I haven't heard anything yet, but I will let you know. I do like the product, but product is useless when it does this. So anyway, all for now. More later. We'll let you know as soon as we can show you something else. Again, always, thanks for watching. Bye. Well, we're all cleaned up. And today we're gonna see if we can assemble the rear end and the springs on that dolly right there. So once that patch is done, that upper shock mount patch is welded in and painted, we can roll this thing up under the chassis, under the car, and lower the car down and hopefully mount the whole assembly by mounting the springs to the chassis. So anyway, that's our goal right now. See how far we get with that, if the plan works. All right, later. Okay, what do you guys think? Is that going to work? lower the lift so the rear end goes down onto the springs? We're going to find out right now. Well, it worked. To my surprise, I don't have them on there permanent because I'm thinking I don't know if the springs are, you know, in the right how should I say it, if they're going to line up with the shackles. So I've got them tight enough to where they're stable, but they're not finished. You can see that one perch looks like it's goofy. It's a little crooked, or that gusset they put on the perch. One side, the U-bolts fit better than the other because I think somebody's messed with this rear end. You can tell. I mean, obviously with the what do you call reinforcing underneath and all of that. But anyway, it went down on there pretty nice. It jiggled it a tiny bit and it fell right into the index holes. So I'm happy with that. Making progress. Place is clean. I got to get that 2x6 out from under the car and patch up the paper on the floor and move on. Later. Bye.